Who knows? Who knows? We're glad everybody's here. Hey, Dave. How are you? I'm Lee. Hey, nice to meet you. Here, thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Abnormal climate is threatening the world's climate, leading to an increase in global disasters. Asia is suffering from tropical rains. Turbulent climate change in Asia. Korea has suffered from inescapable disasters. Now, Korea is going to present the world beyond Asia with a vision for green growth against climate change through the astonishing innovation of the Four Rivers Restoration Project. While brilliant economic growth has been achieved in Korea, our rivers have not been affected by such developments, and accelerated climate change is threatening our lives now. In order to be a leader in Asia, we need to present visions of climate change and green growth by ending the chain of repeated disasters. We started the Green Challenge and called it the Four Rivers Restoration Project.
4대강 살리기는 재해 예방과 기후 변화에 대한 대응, 또한 환경 보전, 수량 확보, 수질 개선, 관광 레저 산업 진흥 등 다목적 효과를 갖는 사업입니다.
The four rivers of the Han River, Nakdong River, Gung River, and Yongsan River will be safer against climate change. Environmentally friendly, high-pressure suction dredged riverbeds of narrowed waterways from excessive sedimentation lower flood level. Enhanced flood stability by reinforcing old embankment. Improvement of flood control capacity by installing flood control reservoirs and detention basins. "16 movable weirs were installed along the four rivers to prepare for the bicentennial flood by controlling water level. Securing of water in preparation for drought was enabled by movable weirs like so. 16 aesthetical and functional movable weirs will create four rivers that are safer and more useful. The four rivers will become clean rivers containing a plethora of living organisms, enhancing the river's purification function by increasing ecological streams and eco-wetlands. Installation of environmentally friendly fishways enable fish to pass freely and spawn, providing our children the opportunity to learn about nature from the revitalized rivers. Revived rivers will be maintained in safer and cleaner ways through the smart river system to control quantity and quality of water based on advanced IT technology. The Four Rivers Restoration Project will lead the way to carbon emission reduction and green growth through low hydropower by movable weirs. The four rivers will change into the livelihood of revived culture and economy. Low water channel with regained stabilized water level will be used for water leisure. Quality of life will be improved through waterfront cultural spaces such as sports facilities, resting places, and camping grounds. The regional economy will be stimulated by people gathering at the landmark, containing 16 masterpieces of weirs, which were designed based on motifs of local histories. And local cultures will newly blossom through diverse performances and cultural events for local residents along the 4 rivers. 1,657 kilometers of bicycle paths stretching from the Han River to the Nakdong River. Our lives will change along with the newly transformed 4 rivers. A green future lies ahead along with bicycle paths leading to green growth and carbon dioxide reduction. Our 4 Rivers Restoration Project will be watched by the world. In order to learn about our advanced water management policies and water control systems, many figures from all over the world are visiting our 4 rivers. Remarkable changes from rivers of disasters into rivers of hope. Korea's 4 Rivers Restoration Project in preparation for climate change and vision for green growth. Green innovation of the 4 rivers, watched by the world beyond Asia. The new wave of the 4 rivers will show Korea's enormous potential and shall flow into the world under the name of hope.
Hi, Georgia State at Robinson College Business and Korean American Business Center. I'm JP Shin, faculty member of the Computer Information System at Georgia State, and it's my pleasure to have so many great audience, and we have some guests from Western Georgia Kia Motors. Also, we have Republic of Korea Consul General Kim here. As you may be aware, we have 3 distinguished speaker series back to 2012, and we invite Commissioner Craig Resser, Wendy Jackson from Kia Motors. Last year, we invite Mr. Eugene Yu and Kang-sun Rob Udar, and this year we have 2 distinguished speakers, and Mr. C.S. Cho and Mr. Chris Pratt. And thank you, and appreciate. And you may be aware, and we have a theme is enhancing business opportunity between Republic of Korea and State of Georgia. So before I go ahead and introduce speakers, and we have Dr. Ip McLean, and he wanna give update Georgia State RCB in the Korea, and then Dean, and give a welcome remark.
I'd like to add my welcome to that of Dr. Shim. And in fact, as I look back over my time as the chair of the CIH department in the Robinson College, and things that I feel a special point of pride is when we were able to attract him to our faculty here 3 years ago, and he's joined with his being on board our faculty has helped to, in fact, build and strengthen relations with the Republic of Korea and Georgia State Robinson College. We've been 5 times now since 2012, visiting a number of institutions and facilities in Korea. In particular, if you heard of this, the Songdo Global University outside Incheon, where they've started a major complex of universities, and we've in fact invited to become part of this complex, and looking forward to when the negotiations are finished, that we will actually have the degree, not unlike the degree offered in the very room you're sitting here, to be offered by our faculty on Korean soil in the Songdo campus. Additionally, we've been working with Songsil University. Last summer we had 30 graduate students taking 4 courses, again here in this very building, and we're looking forward to another 30 Korean graduate students this coming summer. And these are just a few of the things we're doing to reach out and build strong ties between our university and the various fine universities we're working with in Korea. So let me add once more my welcome, and I turn it over to JP for the next introduction. Oh, I guess it's me. Very pleased to, therefore, one of the it always helps to have air cover from on high. And in the case of our dean, he's been very, very supportive in terms of our outreach to Korea, including on at least 2 or 3 occasions joining us. And I would joke, I said, Dean Huss, am I carrying your bags or are you carrying my bags? And I think that we've been able to accomplish, I think, has really been a partnership. So let me introduce Dr. Fenwick Huss.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're delighted to have you here. You're in our Buckhead Center for our Executive Education Facility, and we're delighted to have you here this afternoon. The topic is very interesting, enhancing business opportunities between Korea and the state of Georgia, and I'm sure we're in for a very stimulating conversation. But I want to set a little context. Here in the Robinson College of Business, we of course have a number of academic programs, alliances in Korea that we're very proud of, that Eve has mentioned. But one of the things that we recognize is that in preparing our students for the business world, they need an understanding not only of technical business topics, but they also need an understanding of a broader set of political, cultural, social issues. And you may be aware that the college helped to organize a few years ago the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. And one of the questions that comes up is, what is a business school doing helping to support and organize and launch a World Affairs Council? Well, it's simply the importance of all of our students and our faculty and our executives having that much broader cultural, political understanding that makes the World Affairs Council very important in our programming. Just to give you an example, last evening at about 9 o'clock, I left the 5th floor of this facility where the World Affairs Council had a dialogue led by Dr. Han Park from UGA on what's happening in North Korea. The idea being that we need a broad understanding of the issues in that region, and it was a very interesting conversation. We do those kinds of programs for purposes of broadening the view of our students, their understanding. Many topics are sometimes controversial, but that's fine. That's the purpose of an academic institution, is to have that very broad exchange of discussion, ideas, and so we're delighted to be a part of that. So once again, welcome. We're delighted to have you here. Our thanks to our guests, and now I'll turn it over to JP for the formal introduction. Thank you.
It's my honor to introduce the speaker, and Mr. Chris Pratt. And he's currently President and CEO of Georgia Chambers. And he's a Georgia native, received his bachelor degree from Georgia Southern University and master's degree in public administration from Georgia College and State University. Before joining Georgia Chambers as a CEO president, and he was Commissioner, State of Georgia Department of Natural Resources, and Deputy Commissioner, State of Georgia Department of Economic Development. He has a very impressive resume, and he's been consistently named one of the Georgia Trend magazine 100 most influential Georgians, and by the Atlanta Business Chronicle as one of the 100 most influential Atlantans. He received Georgia Economic Development Associate J.R. Miller Public Policy Leadership Award in 2013. Today, he'll deliver enhancing business opportunity between Republic of Korea and State of Georgia. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Chris Pratt.
Good afternoon. All right, so I'm a Chamber of Commerce guy, so we have to have a little more interaction. It's a beautiful Chamber of Commerce day, so good afternoon. That's a much better conversation that we're going to have in the next few minutes if you'll participate just a little bit. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm honored to be on the program with Mr. Cho and all that you've done, and Consul General. It's great to be with you again, and I appreciate the relationship that the state of Georgia, the Georgia Chamber has with the Consul General. We've worked on some very important things, and I'll touch on those in a few minutes. But it is an honor to come and talk to you a little bit today, and I want to share with you some of the opportunities in Georgia, how the economy is doing right now, some of the opportunities around the economy, and talk a little bit about the political atmosphere that we have and the pro-business work that we try to do at the Chamber. because we do know that that influences the actions of companies, not just from Korea, but from around the world. I want to tell you a little bit about the Georgia Chamber for those of you that aren't familiar, but first I want to tell you why this is very important for me in my personal relationship with Korea. I know last year you had my former boss, Commissioner Craig Lesser, come, and those of you that were here probably heard many stories about our efforts to recruit Kia and the supplier network to the state of Georgia. Well, I worked for Commissioner Lesser at the time as the Deputy Commissioner, and it was my responsibility to be the lead negotiator with Kia. So I spent 11 weeks flying back and forth between Atlanta, California, and Seoul as we spent 11 very difficult weeks of negotiation. I must tell you, I know I look very young now, but I am very old, and at the time I was much younger. And it was the first time I've been in economic development for a very long time, but I had not ever negotiated with an international company, much less a superior negotiator like Mr. An, who's recently promoted at Kia. I learned a great deal, including that I should never call the governor and say, I just closed the deal, when about 3 hours later on my door in the hotel, Mr. An knocked and said, there are other things we need to discuss. And I had to call the governor back in the middle. I said, I did not close the deal. We'll need more time. And we did, but it was a wonderful experience. And I'm always reminded, and I think it tells a great story, and it was a learning lesson for me. The first night that we had the phone call with Mr. An, and Commissioner Lesser and I were in our offices here in Atlanta at about 7:30 at night. And we had a long conversation about Troup County and the communities around that area that Kia may be interested in locating in. And we were looking at maps and building a relationship long distance. And finally, I asked the question of Mr. An. I said, what's important to make this work for Kia? And he said, well, there are a few things that are very, very important. He said, first of all, we want to make sure that you've got the right infrastructure in place. We want to make sure that you've got the right roads, the railroads, the right water infrastructure. All that's very important to us. And I assured him that we could work through that. And then he said, we want to make sure that you're able to train our workforce and make sure that we've got the best workforce in the world. And I assured him through our university work, through the work of our technical colleges, that we could do that. He also made sure that I knew that we needed to have a very strong incentive package, which I assured him that we would do and we could work through that. But then he threw me a curveball. And this is where I really learned. He said, Chris, I want to know if the state of Georgia and the communities of that area want us to be there. Now that seemed a very strange question to me. Of course, what community wouldn't want an automotive manufacturer of your stature and all the supplier networks that we'll have there? He said, no. He says, I really want to know, are they willing to work together to be a team, to have the right type of business climate amongst their leadership to attract us to their community, because we want to go somewhere where we can be for a long time and invest a great deal of money, and this is very important. So I assured him on behalf of the governor and our office that the people of Georgia wanted Kia to invest in the state. And he said, well, that's not good enough. I said, okay. He said, I need you to go down and talk to the community and ask their leadership. Make sure they understand that this is a very big deal. And we want to know, are they ready and are they willing to work with us? And so I called the local chamber that night, about 9:30, and said, I will be in your office in the morning at 7:30, and I want to talk to your leadership about this project that none of them had ever heard of before. She said, absolutely. And so at 7:30, I walked into the chamber in Troup County, and I thought that there would be 3 or 4 elected officials around the table. Well, instead, there were about 30 men and women, everyone from the newspaper editor to the school superintendent to the city manager, legislators, congressmen, were all around the table, as quiet as a mouse. And I explained to them the project, what this would mean to their community, what Kia wanted to do, the suppliers that would be involved. And there was a long pause, and I said, I need to go back, and I need to call Korea tonight, and I need to let Kia know that you want them here and you're ready to do what it takes. Well, unfortunately, there was a very long pause. And no one said a word, and I thought, oh no, I've got to go find another community. This one's not going to work. And then all of a sudden, the legislator from that area said, Chris, we know that this is difficult. But if you and the governor and the commissioner are willing to get this done, we're willing. And around the table, every man and woman said, please tell the leadership of Kia that we will do what it takes. And over the next 11 weeks, we saw a community come together, work together, change their structure, change everything about themselves to make sure that they could not just welcome a new manufacturer to their community, but they could also develop the culture, put people with their schools, develop an entire infrastructure and ecosystem that didn't exist before Kia came to town. And they did that in 11 weeks, and we were able to convince Kia to be here. And they're such a great corporate citizen. And of course, since then, we've continued to have great investment. And so I'm very proud of that. And I'm proud of that relationship. And I'm proud that Kia is very involved with the Georgia Chamber and continue to be involved and continue to grow in the state of Georgia. And so let me talk just a minute about the Georgia Chamber. And then we want to share with you some numbers I think that are interesting. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Georgia Chamber, we are 100 years old next year. We'll celebrate our centennial anniversary. We were created by other local chambers and by the business community of this state to do two simple things. One is to help attract new business to the state of Georgia from around the world, which was a novel idea in 1915. And they were also established to make sure that we had the right business climate in this state to attract those companies here. And so for the last 100 years, and Phil, you haven't been here all 100 years, I know, but for the last 100 years, we've worked awfully hard to try to do that. And today, as we stand here, we have companies and members and investors in every county in Georgia, all 159. We have 23,000 members and investors. We have 200 local chambers, international chambers. We have 400 associations, like the Georgia Manufacturers Association, Georgia Agribusiness Council. And we have companies from 500 different SIC codes. And so you can see that we have a very diverse organization that really reaches around the entire state of Georgia. And all of those business leaders are engaged for those same two reasons, because we want companies to continue to move here and to grow. And we want to make sure that we've got the right business climate to help them do that. Those things don't change at all. And so over the last few years, we know that we've been doing the right things in Georgia, because we continue to see new companies come here. We continue to beat out our neighbors. Sometimes we beat South Carolina. Every now and then they might beat us, but we work really hard to try to win those companies. Let me share with you some statistics. Just in the last 2 years, we've announced over 1,100 new expansions and new locations in the state of Georgia. Those 1,100 companies have pledged to invest over $64 billion, and they've pledged to create over 60,000 jobs in this state. Now, these aren't entry-level jobs, these aren't retail jobs, these are jobs that pay above the average wage. These are companies generally that require some type of incentive, or they're regulated, but the types of companies that are going to attract suppliers and be part of a larger network. Now, I like those numbers a lot, and I want to tell you a little more detail about them, but right before I left my office, my good friend who took my old job, the Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development, Tom Proto, sent me an email, and he says, I thought you might want these numbers for your talk this afternoon. In 2013 and 14, we've seen 19 new Korean companies move to the state of Georgia and establish presence here. Those 19 companies, just in the last 24 months, those 19 companies have pledged to invest $750 million into our economy and employ 2,500 new workers. We're very, very proud of those investments. The two he wanted to make sure that I shared with you in case you missed the announcements. One was Copla, which is a new automotive supplier that's, I guess, going into West Point, right down the street from Kia. Is that going to be on site at Kia? Somewhere close. You didn't get it's news to you too. So this is very brand new news. You're getting it hot off the press. So they are going to create 150 new jobs in Georgia with $15 million worth of investment. And then Hyundai Dymos is coming to West Point as well. 350 new jobs and $35 million worth of new investment. And so we continue to see, because of the relationships that we've had for 30 years in Korea, the Korean economy continue to look to Georgia, look to the United States to grow. He also shared with me a couple of other numbers as well. We now export to Korea around $200 million worth of goods and products every year. But we are now, the two ports in Georgia now are the third busiest for Korean products coming into the United States as well. And so the groundwork, the foundation is there from 30 years of investment and partnerships with Korea that we're seeing this incredible economic growth. So you're looking for opportunities. And so those 1,100 companies, the companies that we continue to recruit to Georgia, what fields are they in? What areas are growing in the state of Georgia? Let me share with you several of these that we feel give us a lot of opportunity. Healthcare is probably going to be one of the #1 job creators in this state. We will be only second over the next 5 years to the state of Utah to create new healthcare jobs. Now, we're not here to talk about healthcare today, so I won't get into those, but it obviously, all over the state of Georgia, is vitally important for us, and obviously the healthcare community is influenced greatly by what's happening in Washington, as well as what happens in our state capitals around the country. Manufacturing, though, is really the one that I'm most excited about. We are experiencing in Georgia and around the United States right now a renaissance in manufacturing. If you look back over the last 20 years, and Dean, you've probably written about this extensively, there was a term that we used in America about our manufacturing, and the term was offshoring. And we saw companies move all over the world and take those jobs out of here. And what we've seen now over the last 10 years are many of those companies moving those locations back to the United States. A great example of that was Caterpillar, who 35 years ago moved their facility from the Midwest to Japan. And now last year they moved that facility back to the United States just outside of Athens, Georgia, and they'll employ 400 or 500 new employees over there when they're up and running. And so we're seeing the manufacturing come back. We're seeing a lot of particular manufacturing growth in the aviation sector. We're now 7th in the United States for growth in aviation. We think there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to build on that. And obviously in the automotive field, we continue to grow and add jobs, and not just around Kia and that sector. Many people forget that we have a company called Bluebird Buses in Middle Georgia that employs almost 2,000 Georgians with an incredible supply network. And they're one of the top 2 bus manufacturers in the company. And there's lots of examples like that we have all over the state. So we feel very bullish on heavy equipment, on advanced manufacturing, both in aviation and in automotive. There's also a lot of growth related to manufacturing in the logistics sector. 142,000 Georgians are employed in that sector today, and we see that number increase every single day. And what we're actually finding now is that there's a shortage of qualified workers in many of these logistics companies. And so we're working closely with Georgia State, with Georgia Tech, with all of our universities and our tech colleges to fill those roles and to make sure that we've got the right workforce to go out and continue to grow that sector. And I do want to come back and talk about the ports of Savannah and Brunswick and logistics in just a moment. But let me share with you a couple of other economic sectors that continue to grow and give us a lot of opportunity. Tourism and hospitality. Maybe not the sexiest economic sector that we talk about a lot, but we really did see in Georgia a huge decrease in our workforce and our companies during the recession. Now that sector employs over 400,000 Georgians, and we continue to see new hotels being built here, new resorts planned in the state, and we feel like that ecosystem is right to continue to grow, particularly in North Georgia, particularly along the coast of Georgia, and then obviously here in Atlanta with the convention business. And so we're very bullish on that sector. The #1 business sector in Georgia continues to be, as it's been for the last 200 years, is in agriculture and forestry. 1 in 7 Georgians now are employed in that sector. Now, we do expect over the next 30 years to see the number of jobs in that sector decrease somewhat as you go to more automation, but particularly in the forestry sector. We know that there's going to be a lot of opportunity around biomass. We now are one of the lead exporters to Europe for biomass products around this state. And we continue to have new companies come and look at what we can do, but we're also seeing now, and I'm very proud, finally we're seeing food processors look at the state of Georgia and relocate here for some of the opportunities. So it's not just the products that we grow here, now we'll be able to process those, and that's been a very big focus of the Department of Economic Development as well as the Georgia Chamber. Perhaps, and the last economic sector I'll mention to you, perhaps the sexiest one, if some of these other ones aren't as sexy, and it's hard to make economics sexy, and it's very difficult. But the creative media industry, so the video gaming, the movie production, this is an interesting case study for the economy of the state of Georgia. In 1972, we opened a film office because they filmed a movie in North Georgia called Deliverance. I know no one here has ever heard of that. No one's here has ever watched it. Maybe not the proudest moment for us, but it actually led to a series of movies being filmed here in the 70s, and we established our first film office. And so we moved along and had some TV shows, film in Georgia for some time. A few movie studios popped up. Generally, they closed. Not the most aggressive approach that we had. And then in 2003, the state of Louisiana introduced a tax incentive package for the movie industry to come and film in Louisiana. And the next year, Louisiana filmed 11 major movies, and we filmed one. So I guess you all know what we did, right? We went down and we asked the General Assembly to pass legislation for a set of incentives, just like we've had for manufacturing, for automakers, for everybody else. And we did. And the next year, we made sure that, by the way, those incentives were a little bit better than what they had in Louisiana. So anybody want to guess what happened the next year? We had 11 movies, they had one. The next year, North Carolina introduced incentives, and then Michigan, and then New Mexico, and there was an arms race. But what we did different in Georgia is, while we were bringing in these movies, bringing in these TV shows, we also started recruiting the studios. And what we've seen over the last 3 years, we've seen 7 new studios break ground in the state of Georgia. We've seen 75 video game companies relocate to the state of Georgia. And so now you have all of this infrastructure in place. You have this investment right down the street. I live in Peachtree City, and Pinewood Studios is building a new facility. They already started filming their first movie there. My wife is very excited about Vince Vaughn and the other actors that are in town making their movies. But we have made a difference because we've made sure that we've had aggressive policy. We've been aggressive to go after these companies, and what we've seen is North Carolina got rid of their incentives, Michigan rescinded their incentives, other states, and now today, I'm happy to say that if you look at California #1, Canada #2, Georgia is now #3 in production of videos, film, TV shows. And we will continue to grow that sector, but we think it gives us a great opportunity to build out a new infrastructure, not just in the metro Atlanta area, but all over the state of Georgia in this sector. And so we're very proud of that. We're going to continue to work on those sectors. But we actually, when we saw these numbers last year, we saw that we were doing really well, that our economy was rebounding in Georgia. And we saw that our number of investments, particularly from Asian companies and European companies, were outpacing previous numbers that we'd seen in the past. We actually went to another college that will remain nameless and asked their dean to give us his insight on, was there anything in particular that was making a significant difference for us as we recruited companies against some of our neighbors? And he pointed to 4 things. And I want to talk about 2 of them. First of all, he pointed to our workforce and our education structure as really being something special and different and dynamic that helped us recruit, particularly the high-tech companies and some of the new market media companies. He also talked about our technical college system in Georgia, which we're very, very proud of. I serve on that board, and we're looking at facilities not just in Georgia anymore, but setting them up in Africa and the Middle East now. He also commented on our infrastructure. Hartsfield Jackson International Airport, as well as the ports of Brunswick and Savannah. Pointed to the railway infrastructure that we have, the road infrastructure. And then and none of those were surprises. We could have figured those out. But the other one I thought was very unique. He said it actually could draw a direct correlation between many of the companies that have made their announcement to come here back to specific policies that the state of Georgia has implemented over the last few years. Now, many businesses sit back and think, well, what happens at a state capital or what happens in Washington doesn't impact my business. But we now have definitive proof that when we make a policy change like we did in the film industry, that we can impact the economy in the state of Georgia. And so let me share with you a little bit about those 2 areas. First of all, I know it's always an interest to everybody, and so I want to share with you a little bit about infrastructure. It's funny when we look at the press clippings from 1913 when we were founded. One of the first things that we did as the Georgia Chamber was to launch a Good Roads project. That we knew it was important to have good infrastructure in Georgia. And now, 100 years later, we have a new alliance that works on transportation every day. We know that it's the foundation of much of what we do. So there are 2 pieces here that are important. First of all, 2 years ago, we were able to work with 50 communities around the state to pass a special sales tax. Unfortunately, Atlanta wasn't one of them, but Augusta, Columbus, and some South Georgia communities were. And those communities will invest over $2 billion in their railroads, in their roads and bridges, and their airports, in order to help their economy. And those campaigns and those discussions all had to do with, if we do this, if we invest these dollars, we'll be better positioned for economic growth. And I will tell you that the Columbus region, a lot of that was based around what was happening at Kia and the need to continue to improve that infrastructure there. And so we know that that's important, but we also know that it's very important that we deepen the Port of Savannah and that we deepen the Port of Brunswick. Now, a lot of people don't want to talk about the Port of Brunswick. It's not nearly as big, but it is now one of the it's number 2 or number 3 as far as automotive importing from around the world. And we have just gotten approval. We're in the middle of dredging that now so that it continue to grow, and we're very proud of that port. But it's the Port of Savannah that's everyone's focus, and I know everyone in here follows it very, very closely. Right now, the Port of Savannah is at 42 feet. We need to dredge it and deepen it to 47 feet. Now, we will need to do that because of the new Panama Canal widening, because we want the ships that load up in Seoul and in Korea to be able to come here and unload in Georgia and not go to another port. We think it's very, very vitally important for us. Now, those Panamax ships can get into the Port of Savannah right now. They can come in on high tide, and they can come in if they have 30% of their cargo unloaded before they come in. That's not what we need long term. It's interesting, I get to go around the state and talk to businesses, and I asked the Port of Savannah, I said, can you give me a list of all the counties that have some impact by what you do, the goods and services you bring out or send out of the port? And it took them about a day, and they called back and said, all of them. And there's at least one company in every county in the state of Georgia that's impacted by that port. So we've got good news and bad news for the Georgia economy about the Port of Savannah. The good news is that the Georgia General Assembly this year passed the last of bond funds to do our portion of deepening that port, $263 million of our taxpayer dollars in Georgia to go into that. So that's been done. The bad news is that the federal government has to fund their portion at $400 million. And this year's federal budget had somewhere around $800,000 in it. That's not quite enough for what we need over the long term. And so we're going to continue to lobby and work to make sure that those funds come in the next 2 budget years, because this is about a 3-year cycle. If we start the environmental work this year, which the Corps of Engineers tells us we can, and then we start spending our money, hopefully the federal money will come, and then sometime around 2017 or early 2018, we'll be able to be open just after, probably about 9 to 12 months after the Panama Canal's open for their expansion. So I would encourage you, this is political season in Georgia. If all of you haven't gotten the phone calls yet to invest in your favorite candidates, you will. And I would encourage you, particularly for our candidates for Senate and for Congress, that this is a priority for Georgia businesses, that this is a priority really for the entire Southeast. And I know we have friends here from South Carolina, and I will say this. It is equally as important to us over the long term that the Port of Charleston's deepened as well. It's not a competition in our mind against one port or another. There's enough activity, but the impact is in the Southeast, and we ought to work together, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. So we feel good about where we are with our logistics situation, with the investments that we're making. We know we have work to do. But the other part that I want to mention to you is the policy side. And that's really a big focus of what we do at the Georgia Chamber. We have full-time lobbyists in Atlanta as well as in D.C., and it's a huge part of what we do, whether it's working on the policies specifically ahead of time or reacting to legislation that happens at the Capitol. And some of the bills, some of the things that we've worked on in the last 2 years were specifically noted by companies that have recently announced their intentions to locate in Georgia. One of the biggest ones is we were the last state in the Southeast to remove the tax on energy used in manufacturing, agriculture, and in mining. Now, this might seem like a minor issue to you, but I talked to a CEO 2 years ago who had a plant in Georgia, same exact plant in Alabama, and he paid over $20 million a year in energy taxes here. That's a $20 million savings that he was able to invest in the plant in Alabama to continue to grow it. And so we removed that tax. The last bit of it should come off this upcoming year. And we've seen companies like Caterpillar who specifically said removing that tax was one of the reasons that we came to the state of Georgia. That was the last barrier to take down before they made their decision. We've also spent a great deal of time listening to our companies, listening to our Kia suppliers, listening to companies from all over the world about the types of incentives that would make us more attractive and more competitive. And so we've now stepped up and we have some new incentives in some areas, particularly around aviation parts for that sector of the economy. We passed new incentives this year for natural gas vehicles that run on natural gas. We've passed new incentives for electric vehicle charging stations to make that easier to get into the market. So we've tried to remove the barriers or look at what other states or other countries are doing where they have a competitive advantage and come in and try to compete with them and at least have a level playing field for the companies that want to choose the state of Georgia. We've also worked awfully hard over the last 3 years to improve the venture capital community in Georgia. We know that it's important as we bring in big companies from around the world that they're going to spin off smaller companies. Our universities are spinning off companies. And we need to have the right infrastructure in place. And unfortunately, Georgia ranked near the bottom in this country for the amount of money that we were able to invest in venture startups. In fact, at one time, and I don't know if this statistic's still the case, but 2 years ago, we were losing 40% of our incubated university companies. When they got ready to grow, they would go to another state to get the venture capital. And so we have opened up the state retirement fund now a little bit to invest in it. We now have angel investment tax credits. We've got a whole suite of programs, and we're going to continue to work in that area because we know while we want to recruit the companies from all over the world, we want the big companies, at the end of the day, we've also got to make sure that we're working with the entrepreneurs that are in our state as well. I'm sure all of you want to hear about the exciting work we've done around permitting on environmental issues, and we'll continue to make those better. We have made a big focus in this state, and I think it's important to make sure that we're helping our students, whether it's through our Hope Grant at our universities, whether it's making sure that we're supplying support for books for our technical college students. We want to make it as easy as possible for someone to get an education in Georgia, and we want more Georgians to finish college. That's part of the governor's effort on Complete College, Georgia, that we know that we want to increase those numbers over the next few years so that we can have a world-class workforce and we can compete. Now, a couple of things I want to point out to you specifically that we worked on over the last couple of years with the Consul General. One of those, and I think one of the most important for our relationships with Korea, has been our reciprocal driver's license. I remember negotiating with Kia, and I believe we were in California, and this issue came up, and they said, Chris, this is very important for our executives and the folks that we're going to move to the state of Georgia that we have a reciprocal driver's license. And I assured Mr. Ahn at the time, absolutely, we can do that, we'll make that happen. 7 years later, we finally made that happen. It took a little while, but we got it done. But I'll tell you what the difference was. The difference was the Consul General and getting involved. And the Consul General saying it was a priority. He worked in Alabama, he worked in Florida to get that done. And I think it's an important lesson here. Many of the international companies, not just Korean companies, but many of the international companies that locate in Georgia, locate anywhere in the U.S., many times they will not get involved in politics, they will not get involved in lobbying. Either they feel like they shouldn't, or they feel like they're not welcome. But the difference, when the Consul General comes in with an executive from Kia or from Sewon and sits down with a legislator or has them to his house and says, this is important for our economy, this is important for how we grow, makes a huge, huge difference. And I know the Consul General and I have had many discussions and some talks and meetings about the importance of the Korean companies that are in Georgia, the Chinese companies, and the Turkish companies, the German companies, to get engaged in their local community, to get engaged at the business level, not just to stay in their own community every day, but to realize that they are part of a larger network. And when there are issues that arise, like a reciprocal driver's license, we have much better success when we work together and people are partnered with us. This year we had to fight off an effort on English-only driver's license again. We had to fight off an effort for a bill called religious freedom that could have led to certain discriminations against different people in the state of Georgia. The only way that we're going to be successful in having the right type of economic climate is if we all work together and we all partner with each other. And so those are some of the the things that we're doing that we think are important to grow the economy of Georgia, to grow the partnership between Korea and the state. But I want to share one last thing with you, and then I'm going to let Mr. Cho come up and share his thoughts with us. We can impact the economy and the relationship that you have with the business community by policy, we've shown that, by politics, making sure we elect the right leaders in the state of Georgia. But a lot of times I think we overlook the easiest thing that we can do, which is simply to do business with each other. I know that's a radical idea to everyone here, that we should actually do business with each other, that we should look to our neighbors. If a company has made the decision to come to the state of Georgia, make an investment, pay taxes here, they ought to have the same opportunity as anyone else, if not a better opportunity, to do a government contract or to do business with another neighbor. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We have a school board in Georgia who needed to buy 7 new buses. That's pretty easy. They put out a bid for 7 new buses. So the 2 best bids, one was from Thomas Bus Company, located in North Carolina, great state, but the other one employed 2,000 Georgians and numerous suppliers in Fort Valley, Georgia. They've been here for over 50 years. This school board chose the buses from North Carolina because they saved $75 per bus. I don't know how much a bus costs, but I'm pretty sure $75 is not a big deal on a bus. When my friends from Bluebird asked to go meet with the elected leaders and the procurement officer and said, "Why did you choose our competitor to do this?" I said, "Well, we didn't know you were in Georgia." Think about that. They've been here for 50 years and people didn't know they were here. I've also heard from certain friends that there are some city governments that had bids to go out and buy some new vehicles for their fleet. And they went with a company located in Texas to purchase those instead of Kia right down the street from them. And so to try to stem this tide and to try to do a better job of promoting the brands that call Georgia home, we've created a new program called Georgia to Georgia. It's very simple. You can go to our website, Georgia2 Georgia. And it really has 2 simple purposes. Number one is to promote the brands and the companies that are here in Georgia and to create that climate where you're doing business with each other. And then the other part of it is to encourage state and local governments to do business with the companies that are here. The Georgia Senate, I'm very proud of. They passed a resolution this year calling on the state to increase their investment in the companies that are here. And we're going to do everything we can going forward to promote those brands, your brands, that are here in Georgia, and to let companies that want to move to Georgia know when you come here, we're going to have a network in place, we're going to have an infrastructure in place to help you do business with the folks that you want to do business with in Georgia. And so I'll give you a little hint of what you can do today. You can go to that website and you can sign up for the 2% challenge. 2% challenge. Very easy. We're asking Georgia companies and Georgia governments to do 2% more business with each other. Now you're probably saying, well, 2%, is probably not a big deal. If the manufacturing firms in Georgia just did 2% more business with each other this year, that's $750 million worth of immediate economic impact. If the service industry just did 2% more business with each other, that would be $500 million worth of economic impact, and the numbers go on and on and on. And so if you want to do something to improve the opportunities and the relationships between companies in Korea, the companies that are located here, then I'd encourage you to think about how you do business, how you partner with each other, and help us as we try to get local and state governments to do more business with Georgia companies as well. With that, I'm going to stop. I think we'll take questions afterwards, Mr. Shim. But again, I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward, Mr. Cho, to hearing your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce Chairman C.S. Cho. He was born in Seoul, South Korea, and he's a member of family, and we call the Hanjin group. Some of you may be aware, some of you may be not. And we have a top 10, and South Korea we call it JOBKOREANEWS. And the Hanjin group is one of the top 10 and investing in diverse range of industries such as airline, Korean Air, Hanjin Shipping and Medical Construction Education University, Incheon Inha University. After graduating from high school in South Korea, Mr. Cho arrived at Oklahoma State University, Stillwater, Oklahoma, and finished his undergraduate engineering 1954 through 1958, and he moved to Kansas State University, Manhattan, Kansas, and finished his master's degree in structural engineering. And he finished 59, and then he worked in state about 8 to 9 years, and then returned back to his homeland, South Korea, and he was the chairman and CEO of Hanjin Construction Company in South Korea. He received numerous honors such as Medal of Crown from Belgium, Republic of Korea Presidential Achievement Award, has been inducted into College Engineering Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame at Oklahoma State University. And also he has established Centennial Professorship at Oklahoma State University. Since 1992, he has been chairman of Hopewell International Inc. and then Gateway Industry Associate in Atlanta, Georgia. Today, he will talk about past, present, future of business opportunity between South Korea and state of Georgia. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Cho.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shin, for your wonderful introduction. 여러분 안녕하십니까? You might think, what the heck I'm talking about? I just told you, how are you everyone? It is quite honor for me to stand in front of you to speak about the past, present, and the future business opportunities between state of Georgia and South Korea. Of course, I am not expert in business in general, as you are. However, I would like to speak to you for next 30 minutes or so about my experiences over the past 60 years, in 20 years of which being in Atlanta, Georgia. Let me start with how tough and rough society was in my early life. I was born in 1935. As you might know, during that time, Korea was under Japanese imperial control and remained so until 1945. Koreans lived basically, Korean lived life as a slave. I was lucky to have 2 meals a day, but there were many Koreans who had it much worse. Even though we were freed from the imperial control in 1945, during the 5 or so following years, our living standard did not much improve, which was largely due to the unorganized political state of the country at the time. In 1950, Korean War stopped, where North Korea, with help of communist China and Russia, they invaded South Korea. My gosh. Thankfully, with U.S. participation in the war was not instrumental in making South Korea what it is today. I honestly don't believe that I would be here right now speaking with you if it wasn't for U.S. aid during that time. As long as I live, I can assure you that I will never forget the greatness and the generosity of the United States of America. In 1954, after graduate high school, I came to America with less than $20 in my pocket to pursue higher education at Oklahoma State University, Stillwater, Oklahoma. With so little resources, such as not even proper high school courses due to the war, very poor English, no financial support. Getting education was extremely difficult. I spent four hours every day washing dishes and would then study until 1 a.m. to ensure my grades were good. Somehow, I was able to sustain this schedule, and in 1958, I received a BS degree in civil engineering from Oklahoma State. 1 year later, I also received a master's degree in structural engineer from Kansas State in Manhattan, Kansas. In 1959, I began to work at Allied Chemical Corporation in Hopewell, Virginia, as a civil engineer. Then, in 1962, moved to New York to work as Parsons Consulting Engineer, where I worked as a structural engineer. Then I was called by my brother to work with his transportation business. I am a youngest, 8 children. He was the second oldest. My brother had a great ambition. He wanted to build the tallest building in South Korea. And he needed an engineering with my experience. I believed that my brother's need could also be one of my greatest opportunity to accomplish my dream. So in 1967, I packed everything and moved back to South Korea. At my brother's company, I built a 26-story building. It was the first building in Korea made with a structural steel beam. The project work took a great deal of work. We worked very hard for 16 hours every day. In just 2 years, the building was completed. This 500,000 square feet building, which was the tallest building at the time, is still shining at the center of Seoul as a Korean airline building. Later, I established the Hanil Construction Company, which built all types of buildings, highways, airports, and plants in Korea and as well as overseas. A few construction examples were military facilities in Saudi Arabia, such as air hangars for F-15, airport in Riyadh and Jeddah, cement factories in Iraq, chemical plant in Iran, and highways in Philippines. Our revenue between 1975 and 85 was approximately $2.5 billion US, which would be around $5 billion today, perhaps. The company grew to the very large. Once the company has 10,000 Korean workers in Saudi Arabia alone. I had gone from the $20 in my pocket in 1954 to establishing a highly successful company in the 1980s. Overall, what I'm saying is that I accomplished something from the nothing. So far, I spoke to you about my own personal achievement. You know why? Because South Korea's story of economic growth was quite similar to my own achievement, of course, on bigger scale as well as tiny wise. In 1960, South Korea's per capita income was around 50 US dollars, making it one of the poorest countries in the world. Over the past 5 decades, Korea has made significant and miraculous growth. How? Strong leadership, like that President Park in 1960. His "We Can Do It" campaign and the precise planning, implementations, hard work, also made more effective by education-oriented Korean parents and global-minded business people, with strong determination to achieve the objectives. South Korea went from being one of the world's poorest nations to now having the per capita income of $25,000 US dollars, more than 500 times what it was in 1960. South Korea's GDP is now $1.7 trillion, making it the world's 10th largest economy, the 7th highest nation in export, and the 9th highest in import. To quantify this data, South Korea's import-export industry brings $1 trillion per year. As you all know, in this rough and tough society we live in is only as successful as the effort we put into making it successful result. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no mercy to be successful in business. There is no mercy. You have to earn everything what it takes. My definition of free enterprise is nothing but entities competing among the various fields of product based on quality and price. It is all the same with other nations. Same. Among nations compete the strength of economic, strength of military, and the political power. It is very important that nations must be strong so that they can compete in the field, any field. Let's talk about specifically about U.S. as recently as 1990s. The U.S. had world leader in all the fields mentioned to make it mightiest nation in the world. However, over the last 2 decades, the U.S. has become weaker due to the lack of leadership, and the union are too strong, and the society with a sense of entitlement in which made it less competitiveness in the world. For example, in 2008, our president's political slogan was, "Yes, we can." Do you remember that? Very similar slogan to President Park, "I can do it," about 50 years ago. Based in fact, I had hoped the recession would be ended in 2 to 3 years. However, we now as a nation have $17.5 trillion of debt. And unemployment rate is 6.7%. While words are good, you can say anything or have any slogan, but they have to be backed by proper action and right timing. The only way to pull yourself up is through the hard work. Based on my experience, this is my opinion of where United States is now. These are the story of economic situation between South Korea and the U.S., not including Georgia yet. Now let's get more specific and discuss the status of South Korea and the state of Georgia. I don't know, maybe Mr. Clark figures and my figures may be different, but the figures I got about week before through Economic Council, Mr. Lee. You know, we have 80 South Korean companies are located in the state of Georgia, including Kia Motors, Hyundai, Samsung, SK, LG, Hanjin Shipping, US Fibers, Korean Airlines, Fly World, the biggest commercial brand, Airbus A380, which seats over 500 people from South Korea to Atlanta, Georgia every day. These 80 companies combined have invested approximately $6 billion in the state of Georgia, which shows indirectly or directly business activities between South Korea and Georgia. Korean companies have created 30,000 new jobs in the state of Georgia. I don't know, Mr. Clark agrees with me, that's the figure. The Korean community is very active in Georgia with over 100,000 Korean Americans residing here in Atlanta, Georgia alone. State of Georgia must utilize their advantage of higher education through universities, such as Georgia State University here where I am, Emory University, Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, just to name a few. Atlanta is located in the center of southeast of the U.S., which is located, which has the best transportational advantage, wonderful weather advantage, and most of all, tremendous natural resources such as abundant land and agricultural potential. Finally, I would like to touch on the huge of business opportunity between South Korea and the state of Georgia. I'm very positive that Korean companies will continue to invest in Georgia, for sure. Georgia should offer more tax incentive for new business and create a more aggressive and positive approach like regular meetings, face-to-face, for win-win business opportunities with private sector companies. And such organization as Chamber of Commerce. President Clark just spoke to you before me, or any organized business group. Georgia must also open up investment in South Korea. a nation full of affordable, highly qualified manpower. South Korea is located between China and Japan. Take advantage of this location. Also, so many Koreans are educated in the United States, which means they have Western mentality, which make business communication much easier than any other Asian countries, including Japanese and Chinese by far. Their mentality, Western mentality is easy to talk or negotiate. You might have difficulty with it here, but that's beside the point. I strongly believe that South Korea's know-how through industry and Georgia's qualified manpower will create big opportunity for high-tech industry here in Georgia, like Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, California. And also environmental problem in Asia, like nowadays microbial, smoke, and Chinese sandstorm will damage agricultural product, will be the big issue in the future. Georgia's weather, natural resource, and abundant land make it ideal place for agricultural product here, selling product to China and South Korea. Georgia should use its resource to work with South Korea to promote agricultural advancement. By combining our knowledges, we can create a better economic situation between South Korea and the state, Georgia for sure. But again, it starts with determination to work hard and to take advantage of every opportunities you have. We should be grateful for the great amount of wealth and resources you have right at your fingertip. It is up to us to make Georgia state and U.S. to be strong once again, keep its place as world leader. But not just the military, political power, but also economically as well. Let us overcome all these difficulties and let us make the U.S. to be the mightiest nation in the world again. Do you agree? Thank you. Well, despite of my unorganized speech, last 30 minutes or so, you all were wonderful audience. I appreciate your attention. Thank you again for your time. Thank you.
All right, and we got about 10 minutes to go, and Mr. Pratt, will you come over here? And Chairman Joe, would you come over here? Yes. And we have a Q&A, and if you have any comment, question, please open.
I want to thank both of you for the honor of the speech. This year, Georgia Assembly has passed the Georgia Revolution, urged U.S. Congress to implement actions to create visa for highly skilled and professional Koreans to work temporarily in the United States. The bill has been sent to local staff for signing. This is a question for Krista. Would you give us your take on how this implementation is being to my vision enhancing this campus, and also is through the chamber willing to follow suit to convince to the delegates that this is also part of Georgia?
Consul General, I generally don't have, I don't believe joint resolutions to Congress generally have very much impact. I think, because many times the General Assembly will pass a joint resolution much like that, and then it doesn't, and that's it. I think if we want to have a real impact, then what we need to do is we need to adopt it as part of our agenda, and then as you suggest, lobby our members of Congress and to lobby the United States Chamber of Commerce, which we have a very close relationship with. I'm sure that they are engaged on that issue, but John and I will be happy to put that on our agenda and to add that for we have a lobbyist that works in Washington, and we have a very close partnership with the U.S. Chamber and other partners up there. So absolutely, we will commit to you to support that, and we'll work with you to get a copy of that resolution and then work with our partners in Washington on that. Absolutely.
Chris, I was taken by the film at the beginning on the efforts to clean up the rivers and how you've gone about it, done that in Korea. And do you think that there's some opportunity there for Georgia companies to get involved in projects of that environmental scope?
I think there are a lot of opportunities. Mr. Cho, I think, said it very well, that we've had a great track record of Korean companies investing in Georgia, and we need to work harder to make sure that the companies that are already here, the Georgia-based companies, find those partners in Korea to have those opportunities. I was taken by the video too, Phil. I've heard of that project, but it's one thing to hear about it or read about it and then actually to see it in a video like that. The environmental sector is obviously very important for us. We've spent a great deal of time on water in this state, and we'll continue to spend a great deal of time on how we manage that water with our partners in the future. But I do think that gives us a very unique opportunity. I think part of the discussion that we need to have is we need to look beyond what products can we import or export, and where are those opportunities for the dual investments like we've seen Kia make here. And I think there's some unique opportunities, and environmental obviously is one of those areas.
Hi, this is Sarah Kim, a reporter at Houston Daily News and State Herald. Let me ask you a question of Chris Clark. Is that all right? Okay. So last Tuesday, the President Barack Obama spoke confidently about his signature, the Affordable Care Act. After more than 7 million people enrolled by the March 31st deadline. So how do you think this federal healthcare reform will affect on the assortment of business in Georgia, especially the manufacturing sector that you focused on today for the renaissance of the manufacturing industry here in Georgia?
That's a loaded question. You want to answer that? So I'll say that the Affordable Health Care Act was not something that the Georgia Chamber nor the general Georgia business community supported. We actually led the effort with 17 other states to file Supreme Court briefs, which were heard. We failed in those efforts. We've lobbied for a delay in the implementation and continue to do so. But last year, when it became the law of the land, we changed our agenda and started trying to help Georgia companies make sure that they are implementing, that they're prepared for the additional taxes. And it's been quite an undertaking. Unfortunately, what I've seen in the companies that we've talked to are having to face some very difficult choices. Many of them are moving away from a private insurance carrier. They're no longer going to provide insurance to their employees. They might provide some type of fee or benefit, but not the actual product anymore. We haven't seen the impact on the general manufacturing sector as much because many of them are self-insured and they don't come under the authority of the Affordable Health Care Act. Our commitment has been that we're going to continue to work with all the different types of companies, particularly those companies of 50 to 200 employees that generally aren't self-covered, to make sure that they have whatever resources they need to make sure that they're implementing and they don't get the penalties out there. Unfortunately, there are also byproducts of the intent of that law that have been negative for the state of Georgia, and I believe particularly negative for manufacturing. We've had 4 hospitals close in the state of Georgia already in the last 18 months, mainly because of the lack of Medicaid reimbursements. And so many of our poor rural communities in the state are really struggling right now. with recruiting companies to come in and have those jobs, and they're losing their workforce. And so when you go to a rural community and you take away the healthcare provider and you close down that hospital, no manufacturing plant is going to expand there. No manufacturing plant is going to relocate to that community. And so you've just hobbled the competitiveness of that community in a very negative way. So we actually have a task force at the Chamber. The governor has a task force as well to look at how we can improve healthcare delivery, what are other models. But the main focus there is how we incentivize and get our larger hospitals to work in some of our more rural areas. But I will tell you of the challenges that we face going forward, the challenges that businesses face, complying with Affordable Health Care Act, paying the taxes that are associated with that, or the indirect impacts like we've seen with the closures, is going to be one of the most important issues we deal with in this state over the next 5 to 10 years. That was not a happy ending question for anyone after that, was it?
What are the prospects of doing business in Korea pertaining to export of coal and yellow pine?
Yellow pine,
And
wood product, forestry products.
I'm an engineer, I don't know that detail. But
no idea. I'll say that obviously Georgia's a coal, you said coal and pine, right?
Yes.
So obviously Georgia is a coal importer. We don't mine coal here, and so I really don't have any expertise to speak on it. I'm sure my friends in West Virginia and Kentucky would be happy to have that conversation. But we are, after Washington State, Georgia's number 2 state in the country for pine and for pulp and paper product. Whether it's Weyerhaeuser, Georgia Pacific, we have a long history there. Now, there's an interesting dynamic happening in the state right now as these wood pellet facilities and the biomass facilities open up and export their product, particularly to Europe. I'm not aware of any importing or exporting that we're doing. Used to come, but not as much anymore. And so that's actually driving up the price in the sector out there, which our tree farmers and our forestry folks enjoy, and that's good for them. But I think as long as Europe is going to have the level of incentives that they have to incentivize the use of those products, it's going to be hard to look at what, I think it's making it more difficult for exporting into the Asian market. And I think there are probably some great opportunities there, but it is a very competitive market right now. We're very proud of that sector. It's our number 1 ag product right now, and our product prices are higher than we've seen them in decades.
Yes, go ahead.
We have a strong presence of Korean companies in state. State did an excellent job. But what are current or future plans? What kind of activities, plans are there to invite more Korean companies in this state? Mr. Clark?
The second office that the state of Georgia opened in the 1970s was in Korea. And so for over 30 years, we've had a continuous presence there. And I think what we've learned over that 30 years in this state, in my current job and in former jobs, is it's about the relationships. And it takes a long time to develop the right types of relationships. And so we feel that continuing to make that Korean office a priority is what we should do, continue to develop those relationships. But I believe our current structure is that our governor takes a delegation to Korea at least once every 18 months, and it's been maybe as once as every year at some point. We also now, and I'm very proud of this, it used to be that any efforts to reach out to the Korean business community in Seoul and in Korea was really led out of the governor's office. That led the delegations, they own the relationships. What we've seen in the last 5 to 7 years are the communities in Georgia are developing their own relationships as well. I was with a community, a local chamber just this last week, who's taking about, I believe, 15 of their executives from their community to Korea to talk about their communities and for those businesses to look at opportunities over there. And so I think it's very important for us to continue the partnerships and the relationships we have with the Consul General, with the office in Korea, the state office in Korea. But also it's important for us to educate and let our communities know that there are these opportunities and to help them develop those relationships as well. But I will tell you, if you look at the funding that the state puts into our efforts in Korea, it rivals what we do in other countries as well. So we think we continue the partnerships that we've got and continue to grow those through the local level.
Mr. Cho, the Hanjin Group is a global company. I'm wondering how involved is it in Eastern Europe and Russia, and the activities of the Putin government these days. If you're involved in Russia, has that had some sort of impact on the company? Or if not, just how are those initiatives regarded in South Korea generally?
Well, I think that I do not have up-to-date information about Russia, but it is essential location-wise, Korea and South Korea and Russia should associate or helping each other, something like that. But between the North Korea is there, so it's very difficult to communicate, even though Korean airline goes to Moscow, and they are social country. So business-wise, regardless of what the political differences are, I think a businessman must go there for resources from the Siberia and Russia and so on. There is no question. But how soon we can open up, freely go there is difficult for transportation-wise. So that will be the question. There's no question whatsoever. We have to go there. Eventually, the timbers like that, the gas like that, they have tremendous natural resources, so we have to get from them. But it's an early stage of game, how to get those things. I think it's the right step, but if Russian, Putin doing is a correct political, some easiness rather than the ambitious of getting more territories like that, we will be, it's good business relationship eventually will come. It's my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, college business, and we prepared in the break, and Mr. Cho, and in recognition of a highly appreciated contribution to distinguished speaker series, Korean American Business. And we have another track for Mr. Chris Pratt. About a year ago, and one of our speakers, and Mr. Eugene Yu, he gave a scholarship donation. So this time, and department, and we pick up Isaac Sin, would you come up here, and deliver an KABC. He used to live in Turkey, and he speaks Turkish, Korean, and English very well. He's a good, asset. Thank you. Okay. And again, thank you so much and for your attendance in spite of your tight schedule. And we have a reception outside rain, the lounge. So please join me for welcome. Again, thank you so much. Okay, big hand.
Brandon, well, I used to work with the U.S.